You'd think I'd remember his voice. After all, I grew up with it. Heard it grumble through walls, caught snippets of it in the vibrations of floorboards, felt it in the pauses more than in the words themselves. But when I try now, really try, to recall the sound of my father's voice, it slips through my fingers like dust. What remains is the echo of presence, not person. The kind of memory that carries weight but not color. He was always there. And yet, never quite here. Our house was a modest 2-story just outside Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Brown shingles, cracked driveway, overgrown hedges that he trimmed only when they reached. Embarrassing. He was a man of maintenance, not conversation. Tools before talk. Structure before soul. I was 7 when I first noticed it, the silence. It wasn't angry. It wasn't warm either. It was functional. Efficient. You could set your clock by his routine. Up at 5:30 a.m., coffee black and unspoken, out the door before I could ask him anything beyond a muffled morning. Back at 5:30 p.m., the garage door opening like a sigh of resignation. Dinner in silence. Television blaring just enough to fill the absence of words. And me? I tried. I really did. I'd sit near him on the couch with my homework, hoping maybe he'd glance down and ask me what I was working on. He didn't. He was a stone wrapped in denim, staring at the screen as if it owed him something. Sometimes I'd ask him questions anyway, just to break the dam. Did you ever play baseball, Dad? He blinked once. Twice. A little. What position? Outfield. Then nothing. When I told my mother about it, she just smiled that brittle smile of hers and say, "He's just tired, sweetheart. Give him time." But time was all he seemed to need, and all he seemed to drain. Like a man whose clock was running out but wouldn't dare show it. It wasn't always like this. There are photographs, ones I don't remember being taken, where he's holding me high in the air, grinning like a man who's found his purpose. Another where I'm asleep on his chest, and he's watching something off frame, his hand curled protectively around my back. But I don't remember that version of him. That man died, or maybe disappeared, long before I knew how to name absence. My mom called it adjustment. My uncle called it PTSD. I just called it Dad. It wasn't until I turned 17 that I found the journal. I wasn't looking for it. I wasn't even snooping. Just trying to find the spare batteries that Mom always swore she kept in the hallway closet, buried behind the seasonal junk and shoeboxes of tangled wires. I moved an old army duffel, still smelling faintly of mildew and sweat, and there it was. A leather-bound journal, rough to the touch, worn along the spine. No name on the cover. Just 3 faded letters stamped in gold, S.O.P. I opened it. The first page was blank. The second had writing, small and shaky, like the pen itself was uncertain if it belonged. June 11th. We walked into the village just after dawn. No signs of life, just smoke and ash. Thought we were too late. Then the ground moved. I slammed it shut. Not out of fear. Not at first. Just discomfort. Like I'd stepped into something private. Intimate. The kind of thing that had its own silence, the kind you could drown in if you read too far. I shoved it back where I found it, and didn't sleep that night. But the next morning, when the house was still, when Dad was at work and Mom had gone to the store, I opened it again. And this time, the page was different. June 11th. He looked at me. Just a kid. Couldn't have been older than my boy. Holding a rusted piece of metal like it meant salvation. I told him to drop it. He didn't. I still hear it. Same date. Same style. But a different memory. I flipped back to the front. Blank again. Something in me cracked then. Not fear. Not yet. But intrigue wrapped in grief. He had a war inside him. One he never spoke of. One that bled through the cracks when no one was looking. And this journal, this impossible thing, it was his confessor. Or maybe his curse. I started reading it every day. And every day it changed. At first, I thought I was losing my mind. That maybe I was projecting, imagining things that weren't there. I even took pictures of the pages, proof for myself. But by the next day, those pictures were blank. Just empty parchment, like the journal had erased its own past. I started keeping notes. Handwritten. Analog. I wrote down each entry, what day I read it, what it said. Patterns started to form. Recurring names. Places. Feelings. And always that boy. Not me. But a boy in the journal. A boy in the war. Sometimes he was the enemy. Sometimes the survivor. Sometimes just a shadow standing in a doorway. He was haunting Dad's memories like a ghost who refused to stay buried. I asked Mom about it once. Did Dad ever talk about the war? Like really talk about it? She was doing dishes. Didn't stop scrubbing. No. Never did. Said he left it over there. Whatever that means. Did he ever hurt anyone? Over there? She turned then. Looked at me like I'd asked her if the sky had bones. Honey, he's your father. That wasn't an answer. The more I read, the more I changed. I started seeing things. Not hallucinations, just echoes. Shadows that lingered too long. Cold spots in my room. Whispers under my breath that didn't sound like me. And the journal, it began to speak to me. Not directly, but through its shifting stories. Each one like a parable twisted with guilt and blood. One entry nearly broke me. He begged me. Said he had a family? Said he was only following orders. I believed him. I still pulled the trigger. You don't come back from that. That night I dreamed I was standing in a desert. Sand in my mouth. My hands covered in rust and bone. And my father was there, not my father, but a version of him. Young. Terrified. Staring at me like I was the one holding the gun. He whispered, I didn't know he had a son. I woke up screaming. Here's the thing no one tells you about trauma, it's contagious. You think it's personal. Private. A storm someone else carries. But if you stand close enough, you get caught in the rain too. And I was soaked before I even realized there was a cloud above me. Dad noticed. Eventually. He didn't ask about the journal. Didn't even mention it. But one night, as we sat across from each other at the dinner table, forks scraping quietly against ceramic, he looked up and said, You've been reading things you shouldn't. I froze. He didn't sound angry. Just resigned. I didn't mean. It's not about meaning. Some things find you whether you look for them or not. I swallowed. Why does it change? He paused. A long breath. Then softly. Because the story never ends. It just comes back, wearing different faces. Then he stood. Walked out. Left his plate half finished, and me with a mouth full of questions. I didn't sleep again for days. But I kept reading. Because somehow, even in its horror, the journal made him real to me. More real than the man I'd grown up with. This silent sentinel of sorrow who had once been whole, once laughed, once held his son like he believed in tomorrow. There was a truth in those pages. One I wasn't sure I wanted, but knew I needed. Because maybe, just maybe, if I read far enough, I'd finally understand the silence. Maybe I'd find the version of my father who could still speak. And maybe, God help me, I'd learn how to forgive the man he became. The journal began to appear in different places. At first, I chalked it up to forgetfulness. I was 17, distracted, moody as hell. Maybe I'd just left it on my nightstand instead of the closet. But one morning, I found it lying open on the kitchen table, spine cracked, like it had been read by someone else. Another time, I discovered it sitting in the passenger seat of my car. Still open. Still unreadable to anyone but me. It was as if it wanted to be found. Not by Dad. By me. That's when I realized it wasn't just a journal. It was a mirror. Not of who he was. Of who I was becoming. June 12th. The boy was in the doorway again. Same eyes. Same face. Mine? No. But he looked at me like I owed him something. A name. An explanation. A father. I read that line over and over again, like it was stuck between my ribs. The way you press your tongue to a broken tooth, just to remember the pain, is still there. Every time I opened the journal after that, the boy returned. Sometimes older. Sometimes younger. Sometimes holding a stick like a rifle, playing at war. Other times curled up in a corner, sobbing in a language I didn't understand. But always watching my father. Always silent. Like me. I started calling him Echo. Because that's what he was. An echo of something lost. A reflection of grief that never had words. Sometimes I wondered if Echo was real. Sometimes I wondered if I was. Dad changed, too. Not much. Not openly. But there were cracks now. Subtle ones. He started staring longer at the TV, even when it wasn't on. His coffee sat untouched some mornings. Once, I found him in the garage, sitting on the cold cement floor, his eyes glazed and mouth slightly open, like he'd seen something I couldn't. He didn't speak much. But when he did, it came out like pieces of a broken song. Desert smells different at night, he muttered once while we were both eating cereal. Like copper and ghosts. Another time, when I was closing the fridge, he said, You ever hear a child scream in a language you don't know? Doesn't matter. Still sounds the same. Then he'd go silent for days. The words hung in the air like fog. I could breathe them in, but I couldn't understand them. Not really. But I felt them. Like the pulse of something ancient and wounded, buried in the floorboards of our home. The journal, though, it began answering me. Not in conversation. Not directly. But it reacted. One night I whispered, Who is Echo? Just before I opened it. That night's entry was short. He is the question I never asked. He is the child I never saved. He is the scream I buried to keep my soul from unraveling. I dropped the book. Literally dropped it. It hit the floor with a thud, but the silence that followed was louder than anything I'd ever heard. I picked it up again, hands trembling. He is my son, and not my son. He is yours, now. That's when the dream started recurring. Same scene every time. A desert. Burned black. Horizon swallowed by smoke. Echo stands at the center, barefoot, eyes wide, holding the journal like it's a bomb. My father kneels before him, hands bloody, whispering words I can't make out. When I step closer, Dad looks at me, not the cold man from our dinners, but the younger version. The one from the photographs. The man who still believed in healing. He mouths a single word. Forgive. Then Echo turns the page, and everything catches fire. I always wake up gasping. Sweating. Crying without knowing why. Mom hears me sometimes. She knocks once on my door and leaves a glass of water outside without saying a word. We've all learned to live in silence. I started recording things. Audio. Just in case the journal said something I couldn't write down fast enough. One night I left my recorder running on my desk as I slept. In the morning, there were 5 hours of static. And then, one single voice. Low. Hoarse. Shaky. I didn't mean to kill him. Then more static. Then crying. Not mine. Not Dad's either. A child. I played it back 5 times before I threw the recorder in my drawer and refused to touch it again for a week. That's when I started to believe the journal wasn't the only thing haunted. Maybe our house was. Or maybe we were. It was late November when the first real fracture in our foundation appeared. I came home from school to find the front door open. Nothing stolen. Nothing moved. Just open. Inside, the journal lay on the living room floor. Pages fluttering in the breeze. A single phrase written again and again down one whole page. He remembers. He remembers. He remembers. I confronted him that night. Did you write this? Dad didn't look up from his chair. Just stared at the blank TV screen. I tried to forget, he whispered. Forget what? He finally turned. His face looked ancient. Not old ancient. Like he'd been carrying centuries of war inside his bones. The fire. The screams. The decision. What decision? His mouth opened. Then closed. Then opened again, like a fish struggling for breath. I chose the mission. I chose them over him. Who? His voice cracked. I left a boy behind. Echo. I didn't say anything else that night. Just sat beside him, both of us staring at the television like it could save us. The journal lay between us on the coffee table, its pages still, for once. That night, the dream changed. Echo stood between two men, me and my father. He held the journal up, then tore it in half. The fire never came. Instead, we were all left in darkness. And in the silence, he spoke for the first time. One of you must remember. One of you must forgive. I woke up sobbing. And this time, I wasn't alone. I could hear my father crying through the wall. It was a Thursday when the hallway changed. I know that sounds insane. But one minute I was walking toward the linen closet, same steps I'd taken for years, and the next, there was a door. A door that hadn't been there before. Not new. Not flashy. Just there. Like it had always belonged and I had somehow forgotten. Wood grain split near the base. Brass knob dull with age. And something carved into the frame, barely legible, as if sanded down by time itself. One word: Echo. I didn't open it. Not right away. I just stood there, heart pounding, palms sweating, journal clutched to my chest like it could shield me from whatever the hell was behind that door. And then, a sound. A boy's laugh. Brief. Hollow. Familiar. That night, I asked my mom about the house. How long have we lived here? She blinked at me over her mug of tea, not quite suspicious, just weary. Since you were 4. Why? Did we ever remodel? Add any rooms? A pause. No, she said slowly. Why? There's a door at the end of the hall. Across from the laundry room. It's never been there before. Her expression changed. Tense. Defensive. There's no door there, honey. Yes, there is. She put her mug down, harder than necessary. I would know if there was. We didn't speak the rest of the night. I opened it the next day. I don't know what I expected. A void? Fire? A child standing with a gun in his hand and my father's voice in his mouth? It wasn't like that. The door creaked like it hadn't been touched in decades. Inside was a small, square room, no windows, no furniture. Just a wooden floor, walls the color of ash, and on the far wall, a mural. Charcoal and rust. A war scene, crude but vivid. Soldiers crouched behind burned-out buildings. A tank twisted on its side. A woman kneeling, hands covering her face. And in the center, a child. Standing barefoot in a field of bones. And behind him, a man, back turned, walking away. I stepped closer. It was my father. Even without his face, I knew. The posture. The denim jacket. The weary slope of his shoulders. It was him. I touched the wall. And the journal burned in my hands. I dropped it, of course. Reflex. But it didn't fall. It floated. Just for a second. Hovering midair, pages whipping open as if caught in a storm no one else could feel. And then it landed, gently, on the floorboards of the room that shouldn't exist. When I picked it up, there was a new entry. The ink still wet. June 14th. The room was real. But I never entered it. I was too afraid of what I left behind. Too ashamed of who waited there. I hear him whisper in my sleep. I hear my son crying 2 rooms away. But I only walked toward one of them. I chose silence. I chose survival. And I paid for it in pieces. I read it out loud, barely breathing. Behind me, the door slammed shut. I tried the knob. It wouldn't turn. Panic clawed up my throat. I banged on the door, screamed for help, nothing. Like the house had swallowed me whole. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Light. Barefoot. Child-sized. They stopped just behind me. I turned slowly. He was there. Echo. Same as the dreams. Small frame. Hollow cheeks. Eyes too old for his face. He looked up at me, not with malice, but with a kind of tired knowing that made my chest cave in. He pointed at the mural. Then he spoke. He left me here. I didn't ask who. I didn't need to. He said it was for the mission. But the mission was fear. He feared what I meant. He stepped closer. You fear him, too. I wanted to deny it. To say no, I don't. I never have. But the truth rose up too fast. Yes, I whispered. I do. Echo nodded. Then you must see. The room blurred. Walls rippled. The mural melted like wax under fire. The journal flew from my hand again, pages tearing themselves free midair, spinning around us like a tornado of memory. And then I was there. Not in the room anymore, but in the memory. Sand beneath my boots. Smoke in my lungs. Gunshots in the distance. And my father, young, desperate, running toward a crumbling shack with a child in his arms. Echo. Except not quite. Younger. Softer. Crying. Behind them, gunfire. Shouts in another language. A man yelling, "Get him out!" And then, my father froze. He looked back. Toward the sound. The child pulled at his collar, pleading without words. But he turned. He ran toward the voice. Toward the mission. He left Echo behind. And the shack exploded. I came to on the floor of the room. The journal was closed. The door was open. Echo was gone. But the mural had changed. Now it showed me. Standing in the center. Holding the journal. Echo behind me, one hand on my shoulder. And in the background, my father, kneeling. Head bowed. Not running this time. Waiting. I didn't tell anyone about the room. Not Mom. Not Dad. Not even myself, not out loud. But from that day on, my father looked at me differently. Not with guilt. Not quite. With recognition. He never asked if I'd read the journal. Never mentioned it again. But one evening, as we sat in the garage, tools laid out but untouched, he said, "There's a place I can't go alone." I didn't answer. He nodded anyway. Like I had. Then whispered, "When you're ready, bring me with you. There are things a father passes on to his son. Some are obvious. A nose. A laugh. The way hands curl into fists when angry. But some things, they live deeper. Under the skin. Beneath the blood. Like silence. It grows in the spaces between what's said and what's meant. A stillness passed like a family heirloom, wrapped in guilt and locked in a room no one speaks of. That was my inheritance. Not legacy. Not pride. But silence. And a journal that refused to stay still. After the room, I couldn't read it the same way anymore. It wasn't just shifting entries and haunted passages. It was alive. Breathing through the paper. Reacting. Watching. One morning, I opened to a page and found my own handwriting. But I hadn't written anything. You carry what he could not. You feel what he buried. But there's still more to see. The margins were filled with drawings this time. Childlike. Stick figures with guns. A helicopter. A burning tree. And in the center, two figures. One tall. One small. Holding hands. Underneath, June 15th. Day of return. I found my father on the back porch that evening. He was staring into the trees, cigarette between his fingers, untouched. I hadn't seen him smoke in years. "What's June 15th?" I asked casually. He didn't flinch. Didn't look at me. But his shoulders stiffened. "That's the day I came home." "From the war?" A long pause. "No." He took a shaky breath. "From myself." He didn't say more. He didn't have to. That night, I placed the journal on the floor between us while we sat in the living room. The TV was on, but neither of us watched it. "Read it," I said. He looked at it like it was a grenade. "I can't." "You can't," I said. "But only if you let go of who you were." He stared at it. Then at me. And for the first time in my life, he looked small. Not weak. Just human. He didn't pick it up. But he nodded. "I saw him," I said. "The boy." Echo. His eyes didn't widen. He just blinked slowly. Like he'd been waiting for this. "You know who he is, right?" "Yes." "Was he real?" His voice cracked when he answered. "He was real to me." We talked for the first time that night. Really talked. No walls. No rituals. Just two men, father and son, trying to dig through the ruins of memory to find something living. He told me about the last mission. About the orders. About the moment he had to choose between saving a teammate and saving a child hiding in the corner of a bombed-out house. They said the child might be bait. Said the building was rigged. But I saw him. God, I saw him. He was scared. Just a kid. "So what happened?" "I turned away," he said. His hands were shaking now. "I turned away because I was afraid. Not of dying. Of failing. Of being wrong. I left him there. I heard the explosion as I ran. I never looked back. I couldn't speak. I wanted to say you were young. I wanted to say you didn't know. I wanted to say I forgive you. But all I said was, 'I saw it.' And that broke him. The next morning, the door to the room was gone. I checked 3 times. Measured the hallway. Tapped the wall. Gone. But in its place, the floor was warm. Like someone had stood there recently. And on my desk, the journal was open to a new page. June 15th, the day of return. He walks with me now. Not ahead. Not behind. He knows my weight. And I his. We are not healed. But we are known, asterisk. There was more. A drawing. Simple again. But powerful. This time, 3 figures. A man. A boy. And another man, older, kneeling. Below it, one forgave. One remembered. One became whole. I showed Dad the page. He didn't cry. He just nodded, closed the journal, and said, "Then we keep going." And we did. We talked more. He told me stories I'd never heard. About his own father, a man of fists and beer and silence. About how he joined the army to escape him. About how he swore he'd never become that man, until the war broke him into a shape that fit the same mold. "I wanted to be better," he whispered. "But I didn't know how to come back." "So you didn't," I said. He looked at me. "Until now." A week later, he gave me something. His old dog tags. Rusted. Cold. Still smeared with a name I barely recognized. "I don't need them anymore," he said. "But maybe you do." "Why?" He smiled, small and tired. "To remind you that survival doesn't mean silence." The journal hasn't shifted since then. Its pages are still. The stories no longer rewrite themselves. Echo hasn't returned. But sometimes, I hear footsteps in the hall at night. And when I do, I don't feel fear. I feel witnessed. There's a heaviness that lives in the air before something breaks. You feel it in your bones before your mind catches on. Like the silence before thunder, or the moment your name hangs in someone's mouth before they say it. That's how the house felt the morning of June 15th. Still. Too still. The air clung to my skin like breath held too long. I didn't have to look at a calendar. I knew. The journal had written it. My father had confirmed it. June 15th, the day of return. But return to what? Or where? Or who? I wasn't sure. All I knew was that I woke up to find the journal gone. And my father's truck still in the driveway. I found him in the attic. It startled me at first. I didn't even know he used the attic. It was the kind of space we only ever opened during Christmas, when we were forced to retrieve plastic bins of ornaments and wreaths we stopped caring about years ago. But there he was, sitting cross-legged in the dim light, surrounded by old photographs, unopened boxes, and a duffel bag I recognized immediately. His army bag. He looked up at me like he'd been expecting me. "I'm ready," he said. "For what?" He patted the floor beside him. "To go back. We spent hours up there." I asked him questions. Not because I needed answers, but because he needed to speak. And speak he did. He told me things I don't know how to write down. Things that don't belong in stories, only in scars. Names of men he'd buried in his memory. The color of blood in desert sand. The sound of a child's bones breaking under debris. The way a moment can last forever if you never forgive yourself for it. "I built a house out of forgetting," he said. "But forgetting has termites." It was the most poetic thing I'd ever heard him say. He smiled a little when I told him that. "Must be rubbing off on me." Around dusk, we lit a fire in the backyard. Not out of sentiment. Just instinct. The kind of primal ritual that requires no instruction, just flame, wood, and something to burn. He placed the journal in my hands again. "Read it," he said. The pages were blank. All of them. For the first time, the book was silent. I looked at him. "What does it mean?" He took a breath like he was surfacing from deep water. "It means the story is ours now. It's no longer something that happened to me. It's something we share." I stared at the empty pages. "Then what do we do with it?" He smiled. "We write it. Together." So we did. He told me a story, one word at a time. I wrote it down. Not the war. Before. The way his mother used to sing while baking. The name of the first girl who broke his heart. The way Pennsylvania summers used to smell when the cornfields were high and the air was thick with thunder. He painted himself whole. And I listened. Not as a son. As a witness. Afterward, he gave me the pen. "Your turn." I hesitated. What could I write that would matter next to what he just shared? He saw my hands shaking and placed his over mine. "It doesn't have to be brave," he said. "It just has to be true." So I wrote. "I was afraid of you. Not because you were cruel. Because you were empty. Because silence isn't absence. It's a wall. And I lived on the other side of it for 17 years. I stopped. The page blurred from tears I hadn't realized were falling. He read it, then nodded. "I know," he whispered. "I'm sorry." The journal burned slowly in the fire. We didn't plan to do it. We didn't say it out loud. But when the last light faded and the fire crackled low, he held it over the flame. And let go. The pages curled like leaves in autumn. Smoke curled toward the stars. Ash rose like memory. And I swear to God, as the spine blackened and crumbled, I heard a child's voice whisper, "Thank you?" I didn't look at my father. He didn't look at me. We both knew who said it. He didn't change overnight. That's not how trauma works. But he started moving through the house differently. He paused to listen when I spoke. He called my name like it mattered. He sat with my mother on the porch some evenings, their knees barely touching, but touching. And sometimes, when he thought no one was watching, he smiled. Really smiled. The kind that shows teeth. The kind that comes from the center of a soul that believes it can be forgiven. The attic became something sacred. We cleaned it out together. Boxed up what needed to stay, threw away what didn't. But we left one thing untouched, the old army duffel. It sits in the corner now, under a beam of light that always seems to find it. He said we'll open it together one day. Not today. Not yet. But soon. I still dream about Echo. But it's different now. He's older. His eyes are lighter. His shoulders relaxed. Sometimes he's just sitting in a field, watching the sky. Other times he's walking with someone. A man who looks a lot like my father. And a little like me. They don't speak. But they understand. Grief doesn't vanish. It just changes dialect. It starts as a scream buried in your lungs, a sound you're afraid to release because you know it will never stop. Over time, it becomes a hum, a vibration in the bones. A language no one taught you, but one you become fluent in anyway. That's what it was like after the journal burned. Dad and I didn't need to say much. There was a mutual knowing, a rhythm between us that hadn't existed before. Not quite ease. Not comfort. But recognition. We were no longer strangers. But we were still learning how to be family. He started teaching me things. Not lessons. Not advice. Just small acts. How to sand wood by hand. How to change the spark plugs on a truck older than I was. How to pack a rucksack like you're leaving something behind. How do you know what to take? I asked him once. He looked at me without blinking. Take what keeps you human. Leave what tries to bury you. I wasn't sure what that meant at the time. But I wrote it down anyway. My mother noticed the difference before either of us admitted it. One night, while washing dishes, she said, "He's lighter. Like something let go of him." I didn't respond right away. Then I said, "It let go because he let it." She didn't ask what it was. She didn't need to. There's a grief that clings to a house. You learn to live around it, walk quieter, close doors softly, keep your joy in your throat just in case it disturbs something sleeping in the walls. But now, the air moved easier. We could breathe. There was one thing left unspoken, though. The boy. Echo. I hadn't seen him since the fire. Not in dreams. Not in shadows. Not in the ache behind my ribs. But I felt him. Not haunting. Hovering. Like he was waiting for something. One afternoon, I went back to the hallway. Where the door used to be. Just stood there. Touched the wall. Closed my eyes. And whispered, "What do you need from me?" Nothing answered. No voice. No shift in light. But the wall felt warm. And for a brief moment, I heard it again, the sound of barefoot footsteps. Walking away. I told my father that night. That I thought Echo was gone. That he'd finally moved on. That maybe he was never meant to stay once the story had been told. Dad looked at me for a long time. Then said, "Maybe he wasn't just waiting for me." I blinked. "What do you mean?" He leaned back in his chair, eyes distant. "He was watching you, too. Waiting to see if you'd leave him behind. Or if you'd carry him." "Carry him where?" Dad smiled softly. "Into whatever comes next." The attic became our sanctuary. We kept meeting up there, like monks in a monastery made of insulation and splinters. We read old letters. We mapped out the places he'd been. We pieced together fragments of memory like it was a jigsaw puzzle we never finished but couldn't stop trying. One day, I found an envelope at the bottom of the duffel. Unmarked. Sealed with tape yellowed from age. Inside, a photograph. My father. In uniform. Kneeling beside a boy. He was no older than 8. Big ears. Dust on his face. A crooked smile. Not Echo. Not quite. But close. I handed it to him without a word. His hands trembled. "I didn't think I still had this," he whispered. "Who is he?" "A boy we met. In Kandahar. Never knew his name." "You tried to save him?" He looked away. "I gave him candy. I taught him to say hello. I smiled at him like I was human. And then I watched a building collapse behind me and never knew if he made it out." He placed the photo on the floor between us. "I see his face every time I close my eyes. I don't know if that's guilt or grace." We framed the photo. Not out of vanity. Out of reverence. It hangs in the attic now, near the duffel. Next to Dad's old dog tags and the one page we salvaged from the fire. The page with the 3 figures drawn in charcoal. Echo. Me. Him. The caption beneath it, one remembered. One forgave. One became whole. We started going to therapy. Together. Not every week. Not even consistently. But enough. He didn't like it at first. Said he didn't need a stranger to tell him what he already knew. But then he met a man who'd served in the same province. Same year. Different unit. They'd both seen the same stretch of desert. Same hell. And that was enough. Healing doesn't ask you to explain everything. It just asks you to show up. I still carry the journal. Or what's left of it. A few pages I saved before the fire. Some blank. Some smeared. Some burned at the edges. But they hold weight. Not because of what's written on them. But because of what isn't anymore. The silence. The fear. The absence. That was the inheritance I never asked for. And now? I'm trying to break the cycle. I asked Dad once what he wanted to be remembered for. We were driving home from the grocery store. Just one of those quiet errands that felt impossibly normal. He thought for a long time. Then said, "For coming back. Even if it was late." Me? I want to be remembered for listening. For stepping through the silence, even when my knees shook. For not leaving the boy in the doorway behind. I didn't realize I was still angry until the nightmares came back. Not the ones with Echo. These were different. In them, I wasn't just watching my father walk away, I was following him. Into burning rooms. Into gunfire. Into silence that made my ears bleed. Every time I screamed his name, he never turned around. I'd wake up gasping, throat raw, tears crusted on my face. The guilt wasn't his anymore. It was mine. Because I had accepted the story. Forgiven him. Sat beside him like the blood hadn't soaked through both our hands. And still, part of me whispered, "He left you too." There's a difference between reconciliation and absolution. One is messy. The other is dishonest. What we'd done, me and Dad, it was reconciliation. An uneasy truce in the war between what we lost and what we became. But there was still rot beneath the floorboards. The kind of pain that molds into resentment if you don't pull it into the light. So one night I told him, "I'm still mad." We were in the attic. The lights off. A storm rattling the roof. He didn't say anything right away. Just nodded. "You should be," he said. There was something different in his voice that night. Not defeat. Permission. He let me be angry. Didn't deflect. Didn't defend. Just let it land between us like a truth neither of us needed to polish. "You were supposed to protect me," I said. "Not just from what was out there. From what was in you." He didn't look away. "I didn't know how. I was just a kid." "So was I," he whispered. "I just never got to stop being a soldier long enough to figure it out." We sat in the dark for what felt like hours. He told me things I'd never heard before, not about the war, but about coming home. The first night he was back, he couldn't sleep unless the lights were off and every door was locked. The time he mistook a car backfiring for a mortar and dove to the ground in the grocery store parking lot. The day he held me for the first time and thought, "What if I don't deserve him?" "I didn't feel like a father," he said. "I felt like a ghost wearing someone else's skin." "Then why didn't you say anything?" His answer was simple. "Because ghosts don't talk." That's when I realized the truth. He hadn't haunted me. I'd been haunting him. My presence. My questions. My silence. The boy in the hallway. The Echo he tried so hard not to name. He didn't avoid me because he didn't love me. He avoided me because I reminded him of the part of himself he'd left behind. And now, sitting here, eyes finally meeting in the dark attic where we'd rebuilt our history, I forgave him for it. Not just with words. With breath. With presence. We made a promise that night. Not a vow. Not something ceremonial. Just a quiet agreement. That we would keep naming things. Out loud. No more swallowing pain. No more flinching when memory knocked on the door. And we would listen. Even when it hurt. The next day, I drove to the field. You know the one. That wide, empty space behind the house that used to be full of weeds and old fence posts. The place where I swore I'd seen shadows moving when I was a kid. Where I thought the trees whispered sometimes when the wind was wrong. I brought a shovel. And a box. Inside the box, the pieces we'd saved. The photo of the boy from Kandahar. The burned page with the drawing. The last pair of dog tags. I dug until my hands blistered. Then I buried them. No speech. No prayer. Just a whisper. You're free now. I thought that would be the end. Of the nightmares. Of the echoes. But the next night I dreamed again. This time it was different. No fire. No blood. Just a hallway. At the end of it, a door. The same one I'd seen years ago, the one that used to appear across from the laundry room. Only now it was open. Light poured out. An echo stood in the doorway. Not small. Not broken. Just whole. He looked back once. Smiled. And stepped through. I woke up with tears on my pillow. But they weren't from fear. They were from release. For the first time in my life, I felt something leave me. A weight I didn't know I'd built my body around. I didn't hear footsteps that morning. I didn't feel watched. Only held. By quiet. But not the kind we used to live in. Not silence. Peace. The next time I saw my father, he said something that stopped me cold. Do you remember the first time you asked me if I ever played baseball? I nodded. I answered a little. Yeah. He smiled. I played second base. For 6 years. Won the county league twice. I stared at him. Why didn't you say that back then? His smile faded, but it didn't vanish. Because I forgot I was allowed to have been a boy once, too. I still think about Echo. But now I wonder if he was ever real. Maybe he wasn't a ghost. Maybe he was a metaphor. Or maybe he was me. The child version. The one who waited too long for a father to come home. Maybe Echo wasn't left behind in the war. Maybe he was born here, in this house. In the quiet spaces between footsteps and apologies. In the years I watched a man become a stranger and called him Dad. Anyway. Either way, he's gone now. And in his place is something better. Not certainty. But understanding. There was a time when I didn't know how to talk about him. Not without hesitation. Not without translating silence into words I hoped other people would understand. In school I told friends my dad was just quiet, or a hard worker, or tired a lot. I never said, he doesn't laugh. He forgets I'm in the room. He flinches when the microwave beeps too loud. Because it's hard to explain the kind of father who loves you with his absence. Now I say his name out loud. Sometimes just to see how it feels. Michael Rivers. My father. Not just Dad. A man who once wanted to be a writer before war made him a weapon. A man who buried stories instead of telling them. A man who thought pain was something honorable if it was kept secret. He was wrong about that. But I understand why he believed it. We found an old cassette tape in the attic. It was buried under a stack of photo albums and Christmas decorations we hadn't touched in years. Labeled in blocky, faded Sharpie. 1988 home. We didn't even have a cassette player at first. I had to order one online, cheap and dusty, the kind you find in thrift stores and time capsules. When we played it, the audio crackled. Then a voice came through. A boy's voice. Probably 10, maybe younger. Reading. Dear future me. If you're hearing this, that means you survived something. That's good. That means you get to keep going. It was him. Young. Vulnerable. Hopeful in a way I had never known him to be. Then another voice, softer, older. His mother. Laughing in the background. Prompting him to speak up. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying and beautiful. Even the quietest people once had music in them. We sat in silence as the tape finished. Then my father said something that stayed lodged in my throat for days. I used to think I was strong because I never needed anyone. He looked at me, eyes glassy. But I wasn't strong. I was alone. I didn't say anything. Just reached over, pressed stop on the cassette player, and let the silence fill the room the way it was supposed to. With presence. Not pain. I started writing letters to Echo. It felt strange at first, but it helped. Letters I never mailed. Pages I never read aloud. I tucked them into a journal of my own, not magical like the one I found, just leather and lined paper. Mine. Some days the letters were apologies. Some days they were confessions. And some days they were simple. You didn't deserve to be left. I see you now. You are allowed to rest. The more I wrote, the more I began to feel that Echo had never really been one boy. He was the amalgamation of all the children who'd been silenced by someone else's wounds. Me. My father. His father. The boys in the photographs we couldn't name. Maybe even the kids in our neighborhood, the ones with bruises under their shirts and shadows in their laughter. Echo was a story. And stories don't die. They transform. One Sunday afternoon, I caught my father staring at the open journal on my desk. He didn't touch it. Didn't ask. But I said, "You can read it." He blinked at me. Slowly. "I don't need to," he said. "I know what it says." "How?" He shrugged. "Because I feel lighter when I walk down the hallway now." I think we both knew the house had changed. Not the walls. The gravity. There was no longer a pull to the attic, no more cold spots in the living room. The hallway no longer echoed. The kitchen didn't feel like a place where silence was king. There was laughter sometimes. Real, clumsy, human laughter. It wasn't constant. It didn't need to be. It was enough. I asked my father if he remembered the boy in Kandahar, the one from the photo. The maybe Echo. He nodded. Quiet. I see his face clearer now. Do you think he survived? He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "I hope he did. And if he didn't, I hope someone remembers he existed." You remember? He smiled. And now, so do you? He asked me once if I hated him. It came out of nowhere. We were fixing a squeaky door hinge in the garage. The kind of task that felt so normal it almost made me forget who we'd been. "No," I said without thinking. He nodded like he expected that answer. Then I added, "But there was a time I didn't love you." His hand froze on the screwdriver. "And I didn't know if I ever could." He turned his head. Met my eyes. "And now?" I breathed out. "I do. Not perfectly. But truly." His lips trembled. "I'll take that." We don't talk about Echo anymore. Not directly. But sometimes, when we drive past a field or hear a child's voice from a nearby park, I see it in his eyes. The flicker. The memory. And the peace. He doesn't run from it anymore. And I don't hide from it either. We've learned how to speak each other's language. Not fluently. But enough to understand that love, in its truest form, is not about erasing the past. It's about holding it in your hands and saying, "You don't define me. But I honor where you've been." I started asking about his father. Not out of curiosity, out of necessity. The way you follow smoke back to its source, trying to understand what burned long before you smelled it. The silence between me and my dad hadn't started with him. It had a lineage. A shadow that passed down through generations like an unwanted heirloom. He hesitated at first. Then, slowly, the stories came. "My father was a man who never left the room without leaving bruises behind," he said. "Physical? Sometimes. Mostly invisible ones. The kind that show up in how you hold your breath when someone walks past you." I wrote that down later. Because some things are too heavy to carry unless they're shared. We were sitting on the porch when he told me the first real memory he had of his father. "He took me fishing," he said. "Didn't say a word the whole time. Just handed me the pole and stared at the lake like it had answers. 'Did you catch anything?' 'Just a hook through my thumb.'" He laughed then. Quiet, dry. He didn't say a word. Just ripped it out, tossed the line again, and kept fishing. I was 6. He shook his head. I remember thinking, if this is love, I don't know if I want it. That line stuck with me. Because I had thought it too. We carry names like armor sometimes. Father. Son. Protector. Survivor. But names can also be wounds. Words that cut deeper because we don't know how to redefine them. For years, father meant distance to me. A silhouette in a doorway. A closed mouth at the dinner table. A man who existed beside me, not with me. But now, father means attempt. It means presence, even when it hurts. It means returning to the table, even when there's nothing left to say but your eyes say it anyway. We planted a tree that week. Just a sapling. Oak, I think. My mom picked it out. We didn't talk about why. We just did it. The dirt smelled like rain and rebirth. We took turns digging. My father joked that I still didn't know how to use a shovel, and I called him, old man, with the kind of affection I didn't realize I had learned. We buried a box beneath the roots. A copy of one of my letters to Echo. A photo of the boy in Kandahar. A burned corner of the journal. Not as a grave. As a marker. That something had happened here. And that it had changed us. Later, I asked him if he thought the boy, Echo, had forgiven him. He didn't answer right away. Just watched the wind move through the branches of the newly planted tree. I think he didn't need to, he finally said. Forgiveness wasn't for him. It was for me. Did you forgive yourself? He looked at me. I'm trying. Some days, yes. Some days I still hear the door closing behind me. What do you do then? I open another one. We went to the VA hospital together one afternoon. He'd resisted for years. Said it wouldn't change anything. That some wounds weren't meant to be treated. But this time, he went. And I waited outside during his intake. When he came back out, he looked exhausted. But not broken. I told them everything, he said. I didn't ask what that meant. I just said, I'm proud of you. And for the first time, I saw him believe it. There was a photo of us that Mom took the next morning. No staging. Just us. Sitting at the kitchen table. I'm sipping coffee, still half asleep. He's reading the paper. But we're leaning toward each other without realizing it. Elbows almost touching. Not in tension, in sync. You can see it in our posture. That we belong to each other now. That the space between us has softened. Sometimes, when I look at that photo, I don't recognize the man beside me. Not because he's a stranger. Because he's finally become someone else. Not the ghost I grew up with. Not the soldier trapped in an endless loop of memory. Just my father. A man who made it home in pieces and is learning how to live whole. And me? I'm not the angry kid anymore. Not the one who waited for someone who couldn't speak. I'm the man who listened anyway. Who stayed. Who wrote it down. In the final pages of my new journal, I wrote this. We are not what we survive. We are what we choose after. We are the stories we break open, so our sons don't have to live in silence. My father taught me that. Eventually. The last time the house felt truly quiet, it wasn't because of silence. It was because we didn't need to fill it anymore. I remember that day clearly. Late spring. The dogwood in the backyard had finally bloomed, the one we thought wouldn't survive the winter. My father stood at the window, watching it sway, hands in his pockets like he was trying to memorize it. He turned to me and said, You ever think about what kind of ancestor you'll be? I hadn't. I think I was afraid to. But I said, Yeah. Lately I do. He moved slower those days. Not from sickness. From softness. The armor he'd worn for years had started to peel away. Not all at once. Not with some great reveal. But like paint stripped by time and weather, revealing wood underneath. Imperfect. Honest. He laughed more. Called my mom kiddo again. Watched old westerns and didn't flinch during the gunfire. And every night, he left his door open. Not wide. Just enough to let the light spill into the hallway. That was his way of saying, I'm still here. And mine of replying, so am I. On the anniversary of Echo's last dream, I walked to the field again. Alone, this time. The oak tree had grown tall. Strong. Its roots thick enough to crack the soil. I sat beneath it, my back against the trunk, and took out my journal. I wrote. There's no haunting left. Only memory. Only the boy I was, learning how to live without waiting for someone to return. He is not lost anymore. He is me. And I'm not afraid of silence. A few weeks later, my father asked if we could take a trip. No destination. Just a drive. He let me pick the direction. We took back roads, avoided highways. Rolled the windows down. Listened to Springsteen and Fleetwood Mac and a few mixtapes I didn't know he still had. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. We pulled off near an overlook just outside Gettysburg. He stood at the edge, staring out across the fields like he was tracing the ghosts of men he'd never met but somehow understood. I asked him, "What are you thinking about?" He smiled. "About how far away war feels now." Then he looked at me, and his voice dropped. "And how close home is." That was the first time he called it that. Not the house. Me. The last entry in my journal is one I didn't expect to write. It came months later, after a phone call that started with my mother saying, "He's okay, but you should come." A minor heart issue. They said it wasn't serious. But when I saw him lying in that hospital bed, something shifted. He looked so small in that moment. But not weak. Just finished. Like a man who had nothing left to run from. We stayed up late that night, in the hospital room. He made me read to him from the journal. Out loud. Even the angry parts. Even the pages where I'd written that I hated him, that I wished I'd had a different father, that his silence had made me feel invisible. He never looked away. When I finished, he said, "That's all true." Then he reached for my hand and said, "But so is this." He tapped the final page. The one I'd written a few weeks earlier. "You came back. Not in a moment. Not in a grand gesture. But in the space you made for me. The sound of your voice. The warmth of your eyes. You came back. And I forgive you." He said nothing for a long time. Just held my hand. Then whispered, "I needed to hear it." He didn't die that night. In fact, he got stronger over the next few months. Took up woodworking again. Taught my little cousin how to build a birdhouse. Even started writing, really writing, his own memories down. But something in both of us had settled. We were no longer healing. We were whole. Years later, after he passed peacefully in his sleep at the age of 73, I stood in the attic alone. The duffel bag was still there. So were the photographs. The empty journal. The framed drawing of Echo. I didn't cry. Not then. I just whispered, "Thank you." Then I opened a new notebook. And began writing again. For the sons who still live in silence. For the fathers afraid to speak. For the children waiting in doorways. This is the story I carry. A story not of war, but of return.